Welcome back to the channel. My name is Stuart and I am your middle-aged hack. Let's get right into it. You know, I'm not quite sure what this channel is going to have yet. I'm not sure where it's going to go. So I'm trying a whole bunch of different things to see what sticks, what gets the most number of views and comments and stuff like that. So if you really like something, tell people about it. Make sure they like and subscribe. It really does help me out. And that will help drive the future of this channel, which is kind of a neat thing if you think about it. Today, I want to talk about the latest Star Wars show, The Acolyte. Is it the worst Star Wars show ever? I mean, you would think so, because if you look at Rotten Tomatoes, you would find it's got a score somewhere around 14% of average viewer reviews. And not only is that worse than Madam Web, it's worse than practically anything. I mean, you could probably just show a video of a blank wall and it would get more than 14%. So why is there so much hate for this show? It doesn't make a lot of sense. The truth is, it's not that bad. And if you disagree, fight me on it. Why do I think it's not that bad? Well, the truth is, it's not that great. It's not the best thing ever. I personally think that the first season of Andor was probably the best Star Wars TV show that there has ever been or could ever be, because it was not as much a Star Wars TV show as it was about a whole bunch of other stuff set in the Star Wars universe. And that made it good. The same thing you could say, I think, is true of the first season of The Mandalorian, that it was really more about something else, not really about the Star Wars universe. The more you get into the details of the Star Wars universe, the worse stuff tends to get. Honestly, there's a lot to like about The Acolyte. You know, the truth is, it's actually pretty good. And why is it good? Because of little bits that make it good. You know, the acting is good. It's got some good people in it who know what they need to do. And you know, the writing is certainly very passable. I think that in the calculus of Star Wars projects, it's pretty good. It's nowhere near as bad as some of what we have seen in the movies. Rise of Skywalker was flat out awful, and Attack of the Clones was just as bad in a completely different way. But the writing here is good. The dialogue makes sense. It sounds like things that, for the most part, people would say. And let's take a minute and talk about the visual effects, which are, at this point, incredibly stellar, to the point that you don't even notice how good they are. And that's a good thing. There's a lot to like about this show, and if there weren't so many other sci-fi options, we'd probably be fawning all over this show, because the truth is, it's pretty decent. It's not that bad at all. And I enjoy watching it. It doesn't deserve that 14%. It doesn't deserve 100%, but it doesn't deserve a 14% either. It does have some flaws, though. The first thing is that I think as an audience, we felt a little bit duped. I know that I did. This was advertised as a Star Wars show with Carrie-Anne Moss in it, which you don't have to tell me anything more than Star Wars show with Carrie-Anne Moss in it, and I'm going to watch. Only to find that Carrie-Anne Moss is only in pretty much the first episode and a little bit of one of the other episodes. Not cool. Not cool at all. And I get it. Ever since Game of Thrones came out, you can't expect any character to necessarily make it from week to week. You don't know. And so, all right, so Carrie-Anne Moss isn't in every episode, but that's a real loss, and it's one of the reasons that I tuned in the first place, not necessarily for some of this other stuff. The second thing you got to understand is that really all of these mechanics of the way the Jedi operate, well, first of all, it makes them seem like kind of jerks. They go around and they've got pretty good sword skills, but what do they, for the most part, get away with doing? They get away with literally pushing people around. I mean, they push people around and they hit a wall, and that's the end of that. and they read their minds. So, okay, so these are talents that you can accumulate, but they're not like really great and noble things. And then they took all of the Jedi-ness of it and they wrapped it around this big bureaucracy. So there, I always imagined when I thought of the Jedi that they were kind of these warrior monks, kind of like, like the old TV show Kung Fu or whatever, that they were largely solitary and they went where they needed to go, really more like the Mandalorian than anything else, except that they just had this really deep kind of spirituality that drove them from place to place. But it turns out that there's this whole Jedi bureaucracy where there's different levels of Jedi, and there's outposts, and there's mid-level Jedi who don't want to tell the council about anything because, they're going to get in trouble or whatever. There's naturally, I guess, there's young Jedi who are just starting out, and I guess that's true, but young Jedi don't seem to have gotten quite the Jedi deal yet. They haven't evolved that wisdom. And so you originally thought that when Anakin Skywalker was kind of impetuous and everything, that he was an outlier in that kind of space. But it turns out that every young Jedi is like that. So, well, I guess it makes sense why they didn't really worry about Anakin. It just makes it degrades the entire Jedi idea. But although the worst thing about the Acolyte, I want to get all the bad stuff out before I talk about, why it's not so bad, is the plot armor. If you're not familiar with the term plot armor, you probably are. Plot armor is really anytime that you say to yourself, well, why didn't they just this? And the answer is, well, if they did, they wouldn't have a story. So we know that this unknown assassin is trying to get rid of 4 Jedi. So why didn't they just take the 4 Jedi and lock them up in the most secure place possible? And the answer is because if they did, they wouldn't have a story. Oh, you can say, well, if you did that, then you wouldn't draw out the assassin or whatever, but you could plant false information. I mean, the Jedi have got mind control. They can do whatever they want, right? So you could absolutely be hiding these other Jedi in a way that kept them completely safe, except that you didn't. And that makes the whole thing seem kind of silly. Now, if I were to give the Acolyte a grade from 0 to 100, I'd probably give it a 75. I mean, it's pretty decent. It's passable, which, 75 is a passing grade. It's maybe not stellar, but it's passable, and it's likable, and it's, and I'm watching it week to week. The way it's being presented is pretty good. They're a little bit too much in the cliffhangers, but it's pretty good. You get, there's so much that you can like about it. So why is it sitting at 14%? That's something really unfortunate about our culture. Review bombing is something that we've seen, well, a lot more in recent years, as you find, untrained reviewers feeling very bold in what they're able to say. And there's a certain segment of this group of untrained reviewers who come in with an agenda. More often than not, it's a very anti-feminist agenda. You find that a lot of these negative reviews are given to films like Captain Marvel or Barbie, where there's a really strong female protagonist. And here again, there's really strong female protagonists. So I think a lot of the bad reviews are coming from that place where there are people who just can't deal with the idea of strong females. And when they see a strong female, they have to say something negative about it. Now, I happen to watch a lot of YouTubes just like you do, and there's a couple of people who point out, and quite rightly, that there is maybe too much emphasis on inclusion in modern storytelling and not enough emphasis on good storytelling. But you can tell an inclusive story well, and just because it is an inclusive story doesn't mean it's a bad story. Unfortunately, a lot of people see, oh, well, okay, there's a female protagonist and she's black and therefore it must be bad. That's totally unfair. It's totally unfair. And I think there's nothing about the protagonist themselves that has to be female, has to be black, but they are. and deal with it. And it doesn't matter. That's kind of the point of really trying, of what I think is good inclusion, which is that it doesn't matter the skin color or orientation or gender or whatever of your protagonist. They're not defined by that. Everybody can kind of see themselves in it. And I can see myself in these characters. I really can. And that makes it decent. It's much better than what a 14% is. And I don't know what we're going to do about review bombing. I think I'm going to do a video on that in another day and talk about review bombing and why I think it's so toxic. But for now, just understand that review bombing it's really hurting this show, and it's hurting all shows in general. Another thing about Star Wars is that it's really not that well fleshed out because we don't want it to be. We? Who's we? Well, first of all, the people who make Star Wars don't want it to be very well fleshed out. Star Wars inevitably always ties back to the Skywalker family. Always. And that's what it is. It's a story about the Skywalkers. It may as well be Yellowstone in that regard. It's very centric to one family. And so with that being part of its character, the further and further away you get from that, the less and less interesting it becomes because there's nothing there to work with. We don't really want to know how the Jedi work, from a bureaucratic point of view. We really don't want to know much about the universe. And so it becomes very hard to create good storytelling that doesn't have the Skywalkers in it. That's why I'm so impressed by Andor, because it doesn't have a single Skywalker in it, and yet it's really, really good. It must be incredibly hard to do with Skywalker-driven stories like Star Wars is. In the end, I don't think that we feel like something is very Star Warsy unless it's very Skywalker-y. And that makes good stories hard to tell. More importantly, it means that people don't want to hear good stories unless they have some sort of Skywalker connection. I complain about it, but even I admit that it doesn't feel very Star Wars unless there's something like that. I like this show. I think first of all, it's the perfect size, 8 episodes. Inevitably with 8 episodes, there's going to be one that's bad. And yeah, when I saw, whatever it was, episode 3, where they flash back in time, I said, okay, this is the one. It's going to be bad. And a lot of people probably thought the same thing right out the gate, didn't give it a chance. I didn't give it a chance, and, because I didn't think it was very good to begin with. I tried, but I just had to slog through it in case there was something I needed to know in it. But honestly, 8 episodes is great, even though one of them is going to be bad. I think the production, as I said, is really good. I think the writing is really good, and it's a decent story if you're willing to let it into your heart. So don't go thinking, Academy Award level anything for The Acolyte, but I do think that you should watch it. I think that it's good. It's out there on Disney+. It's a lot of fun in spots. It's kind of interesting in spots, and okay, it's not so great in spots. But it is not the worst Star Wars in the world, and if you don't believe me, if you don't agree, fight me on it. See you next time on the video. Like I said, like and subscribe, trying to get this channel up to 1,000 subscribers as quickly as possible. And so I really do appreciate you pushing that button. And I will see you next time on The Middle-Aged Hack.